All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly 30-minute webinar. My name is Dre Devots. I'm a systems engineer here at Verify, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today, we're going to show you how to build those essential Microsoft Teams reports. And here to present to you today is my good friend, Victor Verba. How's it going, Vic?
I'm doing well, Dre. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing well. Doing well over here as well. So thank you for asking. All right, let's go over our agenda today. First, we're going to start off with a quick overview of our company and what we do. Then we're going to jump into a live demo where Vic is going to guide us through some of those essential Teams reports. We're going to pause for Q&A, and during the demo, if you have any questions, make sure to ask them in the Q&A panel. After Q&A panel, we will reward one lucky attendee a $50 Amazon gift card. So hang around to see if you've won. Verify is the preferred analytics and management solution for your migration and ongoing collaboration needs. Deployable either on-prem or as a hosted cloud solution, we provide industry-leading Call Manager, Cube, UCCX, Zoom Phone, WebEx calling, and now MS Teams Analytics, along with a host of other Cisco Call Manager-related tools like Remote Phone Control, Change Management, DN and DID Management, and more. We are the multi-tool in your collaboration tool belt. If you have any questions or any of our features, please contact us at support@verify.com or reach out to your Verify Success Manager. One more thing before we kick this off, Verify does offer an enhanced consulting service to all of our customers. Verify's SE team engages with you on a one-to-one basis to remotely provide additional consulting, report building, dashboard configuration, and system monitoring assistance. This is a service that provides you with a dedicated Verify SE to do the heavy lifting, giving you a stress-free hands-off experience. For more information on our ECS service or any of our services, please feel free to reach out to our customer success team at success@verify.com, and we'll be glad to see if ECS is a good fit for your organization.
All right, look at that. Didn't even need to steal it from you. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for joining us today. As everybody here knows about, is we have released our MS Teams version of software. That's Verify 16.0, which supports MS Teams Analytics. Shortly around the corner, we will be focusing on dashboards. So you can expect coming out, rolling around in our next release, the Verify dashboards to be added to the analytics. So if you had a chance to join us last week, our friend Jim over here gave us a great walkthrough on kind of getting started with MS Teams Analytics, scheduling reports, just getting to navigating the report section. So today we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into looking at some of the data, and we're going to go through building some of those reports that Jim was showcasing, using some of the fields available, and then seeing how much time we've got left over, maybe we'll jump into the weeds a little bit and build something a little bit more complex. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. The first thing I'm going to take a look at is just doing general number searches. And that's really, hey, I have this phone number or that phone number. I need to see, when that call came in, who did that call go to? Was it a video call? Did somebody share a screen on that call? Essentially trying to get all the information or the details for a particular phone number that may have called or a number that you placed a call to. So essentially what we would do for something as simple as that is we're going to remove that field when we first start off. There's a default field in there. If you missed Jim's webinar last week, definitely go ahead and take a look at that. He gives you some pointers on how you can adjust those default fields. But we're going to start off looking at our number fields. And much like data in period, there's a lot of different fields to be able to choose from. But the nice thing is this field is keyable, so it's a dynamic search. So if I just type in the word number, it's going to bring back all of my number search options. From there, I click Add Criteria to make that a searchable filter. Now, there's several different ways, and historically what we're seeing is most the numbers that come through in MS Teams, they're going to start with a +1. But as one of the things that I always like to say is telephone systems can do a lot of different things. So I always prefer anytime I'm searching a number to always do the last 10 digits of the number and just do an ends with. That way, if it's a +1 or if it's not a +1 or somehow somebody got a 9 into that call, which again, you shouldn't have that problem with MS Teams, but by searching the last 10 digits of the number, you're always going to be able to find those calls. From here, I'm just going to search for this telephone number here, and we can see current month right here. If I wanted to adjust my date and time range, I can use the friendly little options here. We've got several canned options to pick from. If I scroll up to the top, you can select, from a calendar. For our example here, we've got a lot of test calls in the current month, so I'm just going to go ahead and do March, and we're going to apply that change. And now essentially what we're seeing are 20 calls to or from that number. Now, keep in mind, I searched for both calling or called numbers, so I am seeing all calls to or from that particular phone number. And searching a telephone number is pretty much as simple as that. There's not much more you need to do. That's going to bring up all the data that involves that number, whether it was a number that was called or whether it was a number that was calling from. Taking a look at our examples right here, we could see we have one of 20 calls right here. This is the number I was searching for. This is the calling party, so we know that is the caller calling in. And we have this example over here where that particular number I searched for is the called party. So we know that was our friend Jim over here placing a call to that particular number. All right, so searching for calls is pretty straightforward. You are going to notice these plus signs over here. The plus signs indicate that there is a little bit more to the call. So if I drop that down, this is what we would almost call like our cradle to grave scenario. So we are following the call from start to finish to identify really what's happening with this call. And if I take a look through my data here, we're going to use this first guy as an example. I see the sequence date and time. This is the date and time the call came in. And you also see the sequence duration here and the segment duration. These are important to understand because the segment duration is actually going to go ahead and give you a better indicator of the actual duration of each leg of the call. So what we do with MS Teams is we have a sequence duration. The sequence duration is the total duration of the entire call, which is great if I want to say, hey, what is my customer's experience? In other words, from start to finish, how long are they connected to my organization? For something like that, you now have a sequence duration. You're going to be able to see at a glance how long this total experience was for the entire sequence, one route to the next. But you also have segment duration. This is going to indicate how long each particular field or segment or event was lasting. All right, and that's important to know because when you're looking at calls to try to understand, how long did somebody talk to somebody for, that's really where that segment duration is going to come in. Because we could see walking through here's a call, it went to me. I didn't answer the call. So the segment duration is actually 0 duration because I did not answer that call. But if we looked over at the sequence of the duration, the whole thing was 15 seconds. So it's important to make sure that when we are looking at the durations of the calls, whether it's sequence or segment, when we're looking at the individual events, in other words, how long did Victor talk, we want to make sure we're looking at that segment duration. It's important to understand that there is a difference there. The next thing we're going to do is let's walk through this call, what we have here. So we have our organizer. This was the telephone number I called in on. Organizer of the call is the person who set up the call. In other words, this telephone number here created this call. On a conference, I may be the organizer of the call, and then everybody within your organization connects to my conference. In a case like that, you're going to see Victor, even though I'm not part of your organization, Victor is going to be the organizer of that call. So it's important to understand when we are looking at organizer of the call, that doesn't mean that's just the organizer in your company. That is the organizer of the call that you are taking part of. In this case, the organizer is this cell phone number here because it created that call. In a second, we'll take a look at some other calls where the organizer may be somebody outside of our organization to give you an idea what that's going to go ahead and look like. But again, just stressing the point that that organizer does not have to be somebody within your organization. It could be anybody. If you're joining an MS Teams conference that was set up by me or set up by my friend Dre, when you run a report in your MS Teams environment, you're going to see Victor or Dre as the organizer of those calls, even though we are not in your organization. Next thing we're going to do is we follow this call through. We see the organizer. We see the number calling in, and we can see that this particular call went to the queue. So we have a new call queue here that Jim set up, and we could see that he went to the queue. So now essentially what we have is we have a lot of I hate to use the word erroneous legs, But MS Teams creates a lot of different hops when the call's going through. So we see the call come into the queue. We see the queue receive the call. We see the other user now connected. So these are all basically like what we would call connection legs. And a lot of times we don't need those. Anybody that's kind of used to looking at some Cisco data or even some WebEx data, you all know that there's a lot of different things going on with calls. They're kind of bouncing around internally. They're doing different processes and procedures. So MS Teams, like all the other platforms, does report all of those different processes that are taking place as your phone system's doing different things. So, of course, we see that data as well. Of course, like always, we've got ways to weed that out. So this isn't going to show up like, this one particular call right here is not 6 different calls. What we're looking at here are still 20 calls from this particular telephone number. So essentially what we do, instead of counting each one of these individually or even counting this one twice, we're counting it once because it falls under one sequence of events. So Verify's smart enough to know, hey, when I'm searching for a phone number, if this phone number appeared 10 times in one sequence of events, you want to know that that's one call. So we're going to go ahead and filter that down so you can see that as one call. But we also give you the ability to really decide how you want to see and report that data. Right now, we're looking at data in a sequence perspective. So we're seeing all of the different sequences that pertain to this number or pertain to this number here. But we could also look at that information from an event perspective. So when I look at it from an event perspective, you'll notice we now have 29 calls. Why? Because we're counting each individual search criteria match as a unique call. So that's important. The sequences, when you're counting the calls in sequences, it's going to break down each sequence and count it once. In other words, let me flip back. This particular sequence is only one call. Even though it matches my search criteria twice, because we are using sequence-based reporting, it's going to count this as one total call. Where if I count this as event-based reporting, that's going to get counted twice. So here's my first call and here's my second call. So it's important to understand. By default, we're going to go ahead and default to sequence-based reporting. We find that's what most people are looking for. They're wanting to see this as one total call rather than 2 individual calls, because in all honesty, it's really just one call. But so that's searching a general phone number. Now, there's a lot of different things that we can search for, a lot of different data that we can bring back. Looking through here, we see quite a few useful pieces of information. One that I want to draw attention to is modalities. This is a great field, and let me expand this a little bit here and go back to sequences. So the modalities field lets us know that, was this call just audio? Was it audio and video? And of course, I don't see any. Let's expand a few of these and see if we have some video sharing on here. Oh, not seeing any. We'll do a broader search and we'll see some that I know we had some video sharing on. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that in a moment. But modalities indicates all of the different modalities that were involved with the call, whether it was just audio like we're seeing here, maybe it was audio and screen sharing. So if Jim or whoever answered this call or received this call decided to share a screen, we're going to see that it was part of a screen sharing call. Or maybe it was audio, it was screen sharing, and it was a video call. You're going to be able to see all of that from the modalities field. So that's a great way to be able to identify what types of calls and what different modalities are being used within your MS Teams. Another one that I'm going to go ahead and draw attention to is this call segment failure stage. I noticed this the other day, and we'll find some calls when we search on me that had some call failures. But this is a great way to be able to help identify, is a call failing? Did it fail when I was trying to get it connected, or did it fail during the call? So we'll see some examples of that in a second. But there's quite a few different pieces of data information within the MS Teams structure. I don't know that we'll have a time to cover all of the different data fields, so I'm going to draw attention to some of the ones that are most important that we're going to use kind of on our day-to-day reporting and building some of those business analytic type reports. So looking at the call data, we walked a little bit through, just understanding a little bit of a flow of a call. We have a call come in. We could see the call go to the queue. We see it bounce several times. We also see where the call ends. What we're doing when we kind of put all these calls together, or the cradle to grave, is we're putting them in chronological order from start to finish. So we see that all of these calls kind of traverse through the system all the way till the end point, which in this case, this person ended up hanging up the phone, and the last person to ring on was me. Now, cool thing with MS Teams is you are going to get all of the ring legs. So you are going to get to see all of the different people that a call rang on. I will preface that with that's a double-edged sword, because that does also create a lot of different data points as those calls are ringing. If you've got 10 or 15 or 12 different people in your call queue, you're going to see it ring on all those different people. So you're going to see a lot of calls that aren't connected. You may see that 20 calls went to 20 different people, but only one of them got connected because that's the person that answered the call. The good thing is it does identify all the people that it is ringing on. So if it only rings on 3 people, you're only going to see 3 people in the data, the 2 that it rang on and the 1 that answered it. Hopefully they answered it. So a lot of different data sets to play with, but let's go ahead and get into building out a report. So one of the things that I can see right here is calling party user department, and we also have called party user department. Those are important fields because that's going to give you your business analytics. I can run a report for the technical support department, and that's what we're going to do right here. So if I drop down my search criteria, I'm going to remove my calling or called number search right here, and we're going to pick on department. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and look at calling or called department. In other words, I want to see all calls to or from a particular department. I'm going to add that into my criteria by clicking the add button, and then we're going to go ahead and choose our department. Now, this pick list right here is important because our software is communicating directly with your MS Teams organization. So essentially, this pick list here is going to be coming from MS Teams, not something that you are having to worry about trying to populate or maintain within the Verify system. So where do some of these fields come from? You can notice that there's quite a few. There's street address, there's city, there's postal zip code, there's location, department, division, cost center, employee type. These are all what we consider user-based fields. Anybody familiar with our application from prior platforms, it may be familiar with CUCM departments or WebEx sites. Those are all fields that are generated from the actual calling platform. So where are those in the calling platform? So to find those or to understand how those are populating, I want to go ahead and bring up the admin console for Microsoft. So this is your standard admin page, admin.microsoft.com, and you're going to have your active users on the left-hand side under your users category. Your active users are all of your active users for Microsoft or MS Teams. So if we were to pick on myself right here, this is going to bring up my user account. This has several pieces of information, what I'm set up as, who my manager is, what groups I'm part of, and it also has my contact information. So if I click on Manage Contact Information, you're going to see my phone number. This is important because the phone number that you're seeing here is directly related to the phone number that you're going to see within the Verify Analytics. So right now you see my name as the calling party user, and you see my phone number as the calling party number. That is coming directly from the Office phone number as part of my user profile. Same thing with my department. Remember, I'm running a report on my technical support department. So if we take a look at my department, again, that's coming directly from that user profile as listed in your Microsoft Teams account. So it's important to understand that a lot of these fields that we're seeing as far as user-based fields are going to be generated from Microsoft. So if you see things that are blank or perhaps not the right name, the first place you're going to go ahead and look would be in your admin portal to make sure that your names are syncing properly with your Active Directory and that whoever is populating your Active Directory is doing it appropriate to what your organization expects. So pop back over here. So popping back over here, basically what I did is I ran a report for all my departments, my technical support department right here, and all of the users. This is essentially all my calls for the current month. Now, I talked a little bit about previously when we were looking at the call data. I talked about organizers. So we can see here people that are not within our organization are going to go ahead and pop up as organizers. That's perfectly expected. That's going to be the same as in your case because those are conference calls that were initiated and created by somebody else in a Microsoft Teams environment. Microsoft Teams is global, so all of those users are going to be linked within their MS Teams. So when they create the meeting, you are essentially joining their meeting and they are the organizer of that meeting. All right. Looking through our data, we can see pretty straightforward. We have our calling party number. Again, this is my extension. I'm actually calling into the conference in this case. There's my department. And if we scroll off to the right, you'll notice that the called department, called name is all blank because nobody's calling me. I am actually placing a call into a conference bridge at this particular case. We can also see the direction of the call, that this is an external group call. These directions can be somewhat misleading or hard to represent. Just about anything that involves an external party, external being something foreign to your internal MS Teams, is going to be an external call. So, for example, if somebody, one of our attendees here, were to call into me, our organization, that's going to be an external group call. Internal group call is going to be between two internal entities within your Microsoft Teams organization. You're also going to see internal call, which is great because let me specify the difference between a group call. A group call indicates one or more entities within your MS Teams. So what is an entity in MS Teams? An entity is just about anything that you can do or function you can perform within MS Teams. Let's say, for example, I come into a call queue. That is an entity on your MS Teams part of the organization. From that call queue, I roll through ring on a bunch of people, and then Victor answers it. That becomes an external group call. Why? Because there's an external number calling into my group, the group being the first entity, which would be the queue, Victor answering the call, the second entity, that then makes it an external group call. Internal group call. Let's use that as an example. I call Dre, and now we have two people internal grouped together. Now Dre conferences in somebody else. That again, also an internal group call. But you'll also see internal in here as to itself. Internal here is a little bit different, and it's where it can be a little bit convoluted because we have a call straight to me. There is nobody else involved with this call. This is basically just an internal peer-to-peer type call. So once it becomes a group call is when there is more than one entity within your MS Teams as part of that call. All right, and I know that could be a little convoluted. It's hard to follow, but once you do start looking through the data, it does start to make sense because what you will see are multiple people or multiple entities within your MS Teams organization on the same call, and that's a lot of, again, where we start to see multiple people here. External group call. I have an external user calling in. I also have two internal MS Teams Verify employees on this call. All right, so talking a little bit about the data, let's go ahead and build a report. So we ran a report for our technical support department. That's great. We see all the detail, but we want to see some metrics. We want to see some summary. How many calls came in? How many calls came out? So let's go ahead and build it. Right from this screen, I'm going to go ahead and click Export Results, and I'm going to give my report a name. I'll just call it Tech Department Sample Report. Right? We can decide whether we're going to save this report or not save this report. In this case, we're going to save it so that way we can go back and edit it and do anything, add different metrics or different values to it. So now that our search is carried over, we can give our search a name if we want to, but we want to set our search sets. So search sets are basically the summary criteria we're going to bring back based on our search. Our search is for our technical support department. Now let's set the statistics we want to see. Well, we want to see the total volume of calls to our support department. Maybe we want to see our peer-to-peer, our group calls, our average call duration. Maybe we want to see how many of these were video. Maybe we want to see how many of them were grouped. Other things I like to, are we doing a lot of screen sharing on these calls? Those are all valuable pieces of information to understand how your org uses its MS Teams licensing. But we're going to also add things like not connected in here. Not connected is a call that rolls through and essentially doesn't get answered. I'm going to add voicemail count in here because a call could go to me and then go to my voicemail. Again, we're not looking at a call queue in this case. We're just looking at a department. And of course, I'm going to add connected count in here. And we're going to also go ahead and add the answer count in here. And we're going to shuffle these guys around essentially where we want them. In this case, I kind of like this format here, answered, connected, not connected, voicemail. All right, so I'm going to scoot those up next to my total call count, and we're going to leave on the cradle to grave for this report, and we're going to run this in HTML format. Now, remember, I did save this, so once we run this report, we're going to take a look at some results, and then we're going to go back and make some edits for it. All right, and there we have our total volume of calls. Again, I'm keeping sequences because I don't want to have to count some of these calls twice. Remember, when we do sequences, we count each sequence once. We're not counting each individual leg. So I have my total call count, I have my answered call count, I have my connected call count. And if we take a look through these, a lot of these calls are going to be connected, but they're not answered. An answered call count is something that is coming into me and I answer. So we need to understand that. Now, when it's an outbound call, and this is a perfect example where Victor, myself, I placed a call into a conference bridge. So there is no answered, but it is connected. Why? Because we don't know who answers it on the other end of the call. Now, in this case, we have duration. We can make assumptions that it was answered. But like anything, we don't like to make assumptions in our data because assumptions lead to bad decision making. So what we have here are 48 calls, 45 of those connected. Those are going to be inbound, outbound type calls. 3 of those were answered. Those were calls that came in and were answered. And if I do a quick search here for answered, we're going to see this is a call that was coming to me and it was answered, and I have 2 seconds worth of duration on that call. So anything that's going to show answered is a call that's coming in, identifying that, in this case, Victor answered that call, and I am part of that technical support department. All right. We have our peer-to-peer call count. We have our group call count, our average durations, call durations. We could see that out of all of these calls, 24 of them were video. So that's not bad. That's about half of my calls contained video. So from an MS Teams perspective, I have a lot of people using their video and having their video. Now, does that mean that Victor turned on his video? It does not. MS Teams is looking at these calls as very holistically. So that just means that through these conference calls, there was video turned on. So for example, this first call that I'm looking at here, I don't know that Victor had his video on or Victor shared his screen. I can just tell that during Victor's call, there was video on and there was also screen sharing on. All right. So that's not a per individual basis. Like I said, MS Teams looks at the call as a whole. In other words, was this entire call, was video on, was screen sharing on, was audio on? All right. And then we can see for screen sharing, we see 23 because I do a lot of screen sharing. We'll put it that way. All right. So now we're looking at this report. We have our general counts. We can see how many calls are coming into the queue or involved in my department, both to and from my department. I can see 3 of these calls were answered. 45 of them were not connected. That's going to make up my outbound calling or the calls where I dialed into a conference bridge or I was calling somebody. And we can see how many calls went to voicemail as well. This is a true voicemail count of how many calls came into our department and subsequently didn't get answered and went to voicemail. But we want to see more. We want to see not only the volume of calls coming into the departments and kind of what's handling, how many are in, how many are out. We also want to identify who's managing these calls. And if we go over to our reports section, you'll see that we now save that report. So what we can do now is edit that and add that new summary. So I'm going to go to my grouping statistics, and we're going to turn on a separate layer of grouping. So right now we're summarizing on our all calls to or from our technical support department. But I want to see the end users. I want to see the names of the people that are handling these calls. So what we can do is under our grouping, we're going to go ahead and choose our calling or called party name. That's going to help us identify all the people that are placing and receiving these calls. From there, I'm going to add statistics on those calls. How many calls are they placing? How many calls are they originating? I'm going to add things like maybe I want their video on, maybe I don't. Maybe I want to see, I'm definitely going to want to see the connected and not connected again. That's going to help us, again, go back to that answer count and the call flow count. I can add answer in there and voicemail. So we'll go ahead and add those guys in there. All right. So all we're doing is we're simply just toggling on the grouping. We're setting that we want to see or group this information by the person placing or receiving the calls. We're setting up some of our statistics. And you know what? We're going to throw on some other bells and whistles because I like graphs. I think they're nice to see. And I'm going to go ahead and show my total call count. And let's do connected and not connected in here as well. There we go. And just because I like graphs. Now, all we're doing is we're just making some changes to our report. Again, we turned on grouping so we can see the user names. Everything else we're going to leave the same. I'm going to leave detail on in this case just so we can kind of pick through it. I'm going to leave the start to finish and cradle to grave turned on again so we can pick through it. Give our report a save. And let's go ahead and run it for the month and see what we did here. Dre, while this guy is running, are there any questions or anything that we have?
Yeah, not right now. I'll give everybody here
perfect.
just a couple seconds if they had any more questions here, but yeah, I haven't seen anything as of yet.
All right, excellent. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, I know we are getting close to time, so I'm going to wrap this up. But if you have any questions, make sure to go ahead and pop them in the chat or the QA panel there. But now essentially what we have here is our total volume. This is exactly what we were seeing on our other report there, but we added to it. Now we added our end users. So now we get to see the people that are actually placing and receiving these calls. We can see that 24 calls between Jim and I. That's because Jim and I are mostly the ones doing these test calls. We can see how many of those calls were connected, how many were not connected, how many got answered, how many ended up going to voicemail, our peer-to-peer count, our group call count. And like I said, understanding that most of these calls, because in our case they hit multiple entities, are going to be group calls, how many we originated and how many we received. So if I click on this guy right here, this is going to bring me down to Jim's calls, and now I get to see all of Jim's calls, all the ones he placed, all the ones he received, as well as the cradle to grave. Now you're going to notice, like I said, Jim and I did a lot of test calls. So when we look at the cradle to grave, you can see Jim's highlighted in orange. Why is he highlighted in orange? Because I searched on the technical support department. So we're isolating the call that went to Jim or from the technical support department. And then this call also went to me for 44 minutes, and I am part of the technical support department. So although this is counted twice, it is counted twice because it tracks to both Jim and myself, and there's Jim and myself. So that's why we see those calls together. All right. So I hope I was able to shed a little light on just kind of navigating and starting to get build out some of the reports. Please stay tuned as we do more of these webinars, as we're going to start getting into even more technical information, building out cradle to grave search sets, queue-based reports, and things like that. So keep your eye out for future webinars. But I hope this gives you a start on building some business-based reports, also understanding how some of these fields that we have are being populated. So if you see things that are blank, why don't I have a city? Why don't I have a postal zip code? Why are some of my telephone numbers missing? It's going to a lot relate back to the user entity that's programmed in your MS Teams environment. So with all that said, Dre, let me go ahead and pass the ball back to you.
Just want to say thank you to everybody for joining our webinar today. Don't forget, we got next week our quick start guide to Zoom Analytics, and it's going to be myself again, Dre Devots, and Matt Sykes, 11 PST, April 3rd next week. So I hope to see everyone there. And that's going to wrap it up for us today. So everybody have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, guys. Thanks all.